Hey everybody, welcome. We're gonna wait a few minutes before getting started. Enjoy the music.
Happy Friday.
Yeah. So you had an earthquake, Linda?
Pardon?
Did you have an earthquake?
Yeah, in like upstate New York or New Jersey. I think that's what the epicenter was, 4.8. I actually felt my desk shake a little. I thought it was the washing machine, which is not running. So it's kind of cool.
But you're
For us, it's
okay.
cool.
Everything's
Yeah, they're
okay.
mild. Yeah, it was mild here. I'm sure you have more experience with earthquakes than I do.
When I was a kid in Southern California, my grandma was visiting from Germany, and so she would retell this story as like, "Oh my God, my daughter and her family are so Californian. There's an earthquake in the middle of the night and it woke me up and I ran out of my bed into the hallway and I was like, Mom, Dad, there's an earthquake, stop, drop and roll or go into whatever, go into the door frame or we gotta go outside. And like, it's okay, Sophie, just go back to bed. And my grandma was just like, oh, you Californians don't even care. All right, well, do it. Let's begin. We have a lot to cover today. Okay, Rebecca, kick us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our presentation today. We have a few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and the recording link will be available to you. This presentation is an educational service by Alcorn Immigration Law, and the information discussed should not be construed as legal advice for any specific action and is an overview only. Please be sure to consult a knowledgeable professional for assistance with your particular issue. Lastly, please submit any questions you may have using Zoom's Q&A function and do so anonymously. These questions are shared publicly, so please do not share any sensitive or personal information. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our founder and CEO, Sophie Alcorn, and our Chief Legal Officer of Excellence, Lynda Hagerty.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Here we go. All right. Hey, everybody. You're all going to get a recording of this after the fact, and we do have a hard stop at the hour. So unlike some of our other webinars where I will be able to stay for 30 minutes and answer 47 questions, that is not the case today. So if you know you have a question, please put it in the Q&A panel now, because if there's a bunch of questions, oh, I already see a question. Good job. Depending on how many questions there are, Lynda and I are going to adapt the length of our slides to accommodate, because we would rather give you a foundation, but ensure all questions are being answered instead of like giving you a ton of unnecessary immigration stuff and not answering your questions. So hi, everybody. Some of you were at our webinar yesterday for what to do if your employees were selected in the H-1B lottery. And this is our sister webinar to that, what to do if you were not selected in the H-1B lottery. My name is Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, host of the Sophie Alcorn podcast. You can subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I've been writing for TechCrunch for several years. I'm into meditation. I'm a mom. I believe that the world we want to live in is one where every child has the opportunity to self-actualize and live their full potential and achieve their dreams. And so by removing the barriers of immigration in people's lives, that is something we aspire to create in the world. And I'm here with my amazing colleague, Lynda Hagerty. She's a business immigration attorney, over 22 years of experience. She runs our whole legal operation here at Alcorn. So she's in charge of our attorneys and our paralegals, and she's the one who makes sure that we are winning those cases. I am honored to have you here, Lynda. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. We have an amazing team of dedicated, passionate immigration law professionals, attorneys, and paralegals. I'm in Palo Alto. We are a remote team distributed across the United States, California, Texas, North Carolina, Massachusetts. Our primary office is in Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. We work with a lot of founders and technology clients, but we also work with other professionals and software engineers and upper management at big tech companies. And influencers and artists. So our primary focus is technology immigration, but really our clients run the gamut. And our team is comprised of really dedicated people who care a lot, who might be immigrants themselves or children of immigrants or married to immigrants or been working in immigration for decades. So it's definitely a passion project for all of us, and we're very committed to helping our clients achieve their dreams. Is this webinar for me? Well, were you not selected in the H-1B lottery? Then yes. And is that because nobody put you in the lottery? We can help you. And is it because you were put in the lottery and you didn't get chosen? We can help you out. And this is also going to be a lot of tips and stuff if you don't want to just wait around for another year, biting your fingernails until March of 2025 to find out if you get another bite at the apple. So we're going to be talking about visas, green cards, lots of alphabet soup categories of visas, cap exempt H-1Bs, O-1s with agents, self-petitioning your green card, EB-1A, EB-2NIW, a lot of hot things. And this is geared both for immigrants, and it's also going to be very helpful for CEOs and people ops and HR and COOs and CFOs and people running immigration programs at companies and startups who need to decide how they can attract and retain their top global talent. Okay, so immigration basics. Lynda, kick us off. Where does the H-1B lottery fit into all this, and what's the general overview here?
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of think of these as different buckets. So we've got the visas, which is really like a temporary stay in the US, and you're here for a specific duration. Could be a student, could be an H-1B worker, business visitor. The middle one is the green card, and that's really going to allow you to work for any employer. And you can get work permission as well while the green card's pending, but you have to maintain that green card and be a resident of the US. And then the last one is citizenship. That's when you get the US passport, you can vote, and you don't have anything holding you back. You can spend time abroad and there's no issues. So
great. And so the H-1B is a visa. And so a lot of people want that visa before they start the green card process. What are some of the reasons why it could be helpful if you had gotten an H-1B, why that would help pave the way for a green card?
yeah, I mean, one of the great things that the H-1B does provide is dual intent. So if you are an H-1B status, you can be pursuing a green card, and that intent isn't going to have any negative impact on your future green card. You'll have flexibility to travel. The other nice thing about the H-1B and green card is that even though you have a 6-year time limit, if you start the green card early enough in your H-1B timeline and reach certain green card milestones, you can keep extending that H-1B for 10 years, 20 years, however long it takes. So that's a really nice perk.
So I was just recording a podcast with a fellow AILA immigration attorney, and I was brainstorming, if you don't want to get an EB-1A and you can get an H-1B and you're from India, maybe your number one task is to get a priority date as quickly as possible to reduce your time in line of green card and to kick off so that eventually when you do get an H-1B, you get those unlimited extensions, your spouse can get a work permit. And then if you have your US citizen anchor babies, then at least in 21 years, they can sponsor you for a green card. But H-1Bs are not the only type of visa, and you don't even need a visa to move to the US on a green card. Some of our clients who are living in other countries who didn't get selected in the lottery, they're like, well, look, I want to move there in 2 years and I qualify for a fast green card. And so, forget the randomness. I'm just going to start my green card and then I'm going to move my wife and my kids when we're all stable and we have our green cards. There's a lot of ways to do this. Not everybody even wants citizenship. Not everybody even wants a green card. I think for a lot of people, it's really great. But, if you're expecting a $400 million exit from your startup, maybe for tax reasons, you don't want a green card. But some of the reasons people want citizenship one day and a green card is necessary first are bring your parents here, be able to be a digital nomad and be gone for long periods of time and always be able to come back, be able to vote. So there's a variety of reasons. And paying taxes in the US after your startup exit, could be significant depending on your country and their tax treaty and whatever your tax advisor tells you to do. But some people see it as just, the cost of admission. Look, what I can build here is orders of magnitude beyond what I could build in another country. So like, yes, there is this thing that might happen when I exit, but I think there's also ways to work with your corporate attorney to structure things differently. So, and not everybody here is a startup founder, but that's the overview. So first we're going to be talking about a variety of visas besides H-1Bs that can allow you to live here and work here for a certain purpose, duration, and will allow you to have that springboard to get a green card. A lot of the people who might be on this webinar are students. I'll just make it brief, but you might be here on as an undergrad or master's or PhD student on F1. Maybe before you graduate, you work a little bit on curricular practical training, maybe, or pre-completion OPT. Maybe after you graduate, you get regular post-completion one-year OPT or F1 STEM OPT. We've helped founders qualify for OPT and STEM OPT. We help a lot of employees at tech companies and VC firms qualify for both as well. And really the hope of this whole rat race is that on one of these years of OPT, you're going to get selected in the H-1B lottery, and then your company is going to start your green card process with a perm, and eventually an I-140 petition, and then eventually adjustment of status. How long is perm taking right now, Lynda? Like the whole perm process?
Yeah, I mean, from like this prevailing wage filing until the perm approval, it's probably about 20 months right now.
It's a long time. And so would your priority, when does your priority date, if you go through a perm-based green card process, where is your priority date drawn from?
It's usually about 12 months into the process is when you electronically submit the perm application to Department of Labor. So you've done the prevailing wage, you've done the labor market test, you submit the form. That's when you don't really capture that priority date until you file the next phase, the I-140, but you basically, preemptively, you have that date in your pocket that you can apply to the next stage.
Yeah, and then there can be a big gap in time between the I-140 petition and the adjustment of status, and that's governed by something called the visa bulletin, and there's priority dates and backlogs and which category, which month per country is current. So it's this giant like game theory thing. So that's what we're going to be talking more about today. and just to zoom in a little bit more, like, yes, if you marry a US citizen, they can sponsor you for a green card. Do not have a fraudulent marriage. That involves obviously paying somebody to marry you, but it also involves marrying a friend who's doing you a favor if you're not actually in a relationship with them. I do think though that if you have, like, if you're actually, seriously dating somebody who's an American and you speed up the date of your wedding to help with immigration, I think that's fine. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about how to get a green card without an employer, without marrying an American, without $1 million, without a random lottery. There are all of those other pathways, but they're not going to be the focus. For green cards, we'll be primarily focusing on EB-1A and EB-2 under W. But for now, let's start with some of the popular alternatives for H-1Bs. So these are going to help if you are in the US on regular OPT or STEM OPT and you want to do a change of status. They're going to help if you are outside of the US and you want to come here for the first time. And some of these are going to help if you're in, like some of you guys might be on like an L1, for example, at a specific company, but you're looking for job flexibility and maybe the company, their H-1B didn't get selected for you. And so you're in the US, but you're stuck at one company. So this could also work for a change of status from one non-immigrant work status to another. So super high level, Lynda, what is the O visa? It's one of our favorites these days.
Yeah, I mean, so this is another work visa that really allows us to be more creative, I would say. You don't have an annual quota, so that's a perk, but you have to be able to qualify based on your achievements, awards, accomplishments. And you can do it through an employer, or you could be more creative and have an agent serve as an employer. And you can do gigs and work for multiple companies. So it's really a great tool to use it if you do qualify.
Yeah, we've been getting lots of questions about O1s and agents, and I see that one of our questions actually in the Q&A panel is on that, and we're scheduling a webinar specifically on O1 visas and agents and how to petition, what the itinerary of services looks like, what is work in your field, how do you pitch it to a small company that you're employable, how to try to negotiate with a large company that they should be able to hire you on this. I mean, it's a very basic thing. It's like, you have an O1, it's approved, you're allowed to be in the US and work in your field. They shouldn't be discriminating against you for those documents, but some of the bigger companies have been a little bit dubious about this, but we've been doing it repeatedly for many, many clients. So you'll get the webinar registration link. I think that'll be on April 26th. So in general, there are 10 extraordinary ability criteria, but there's 8 for O1s, there's 10 for EB1A, there's a different set for O1B for artists, which we use for UX UI designers. So in general, it's like there's a bunch of categories of what type of stuff they care about. We're figuring out how to position you as a leader in your very niche, small subfield of endeavor. And if we can show that you have evidence in at least 3 of these categories that demonstrates that you're at the very top of this niche subfield in a country or in the world, then you're allowed to come to the United States to do work in that field. And traditionally, a company could sponsor an employee for an O1. So that would just be like a 3-year W-2 employee salary, just like an H-1B, but there's no prevailing wage, minimum wage requirement. So it's a little more flexible. A reason that people don't want an O1 is if you're married and your spouse needs a dependent work visa, there's none. It's not possible. So you would have, a lot of our clients do this when their spouses don't need to work, and then they're poised to begin the green card process. So their spouse can eventually get a work permit through the I-485. We've done these for a lot of types of people. What types of job profiles have you been seeing for folks coming through?
I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of people in the AI fields, engineers.
Yeah, that's true.
We do these for entrepreneurs as well, like startups, founders.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists are going to be a little bit easier because you've got the publications and the peer review work typically. So we do a broad spectrum of different profiles for sure.
Yeah, and we're not limited to those. Like 8 years ago when I started the law firm, I kind of like invented there were a few practitioners doing startup founder O1s at the time, but it was kind of like a big stretch to expand the law from researchers to startup founders. But we did it. And now people are like, well, Sophie, I'm not a professor and I'm not a founder. So how can I show extraordinary ability? Like, we just invented that. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
We can figure it out for you. It's fine. It's fine. So it's definitely possible. A few other things to note on this, and maybe we can share those resources with everybody in the chat window now, but we have a couple of different offerings that we have created to help people become qualified for an O1 and also assess whether they are already qualified for an O1A for extraordinary ability or an EB1A green card for extraordinary ability or an EB2 national interest waiver green card. So the first is my online class, Alcorn Academy. It's 15 video modules. I think somebody can get through it in about a month. And I've seen people complete the program in, maybe 6 weeks or something, maybe 6 months. It depends on how motivated you are and how much you've already done. But that's like a very deep dive where I went through every piece of regulatory text for each of the prongs and tons of examples of redacted requests for evidence that our clients had received, where I teased out, like here's what an RFE looks like for membership in associations, and here's how to make sure your associations will qualify. So that's like the educational offering. If you have some of the stuff already, but you're not sure if it's good enough yet, that's where you would go to Legal Launch. It's 4 weeks. It's our proprietary 3-stage assessment program where we give you our checklists, O1A, EB1A, EB2, and IW. You upload all of your evidence that you can think of. We go through our 3-stage internal review process, and it culminates in an attorney consultation where either like, oh yeah, you qualify, or you're marginal, or no, we're not going to accept your case, and here's your personalized checklist. Go do this stuff in the next 6 months. We're going to credit the $2,500 from the program to your O1 in the future within the next 6 months. So try to be creative. Companies can do these programs for their employees as well. Like if you have a researcher or I don't know, like a VC working for you or somebody who wants to get famous and it makes sense for the job and the company and you want to become qualified. So great. Okay, so that's O1s. Let's talk about L1s. This is your favorite, Lynda. What is the L1 visa and why would it apply for somebody who wasn't picked in the H-1B lottery?
Yeah, I mean, the L1 intercompany transferee visa is a really nice option if there is a foreign entity. So you have to have a foreign entity that's been doing business for at least a year. And if someone has worked for that foreign entity for at least a year and the preceding 3 years, they can transfer into the US into an L1, into one of the L1 subcategories.
Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the L1 is great for, I've worked on these cases for people that maybe weren't selected in the lottery and their company has an entity abroad, or they're starting an entity abroad. You park them abroad for a year, you could still enroll in the lottery, but if that doesn't work out, you've got that L1, that 1 year given abroad. But the time spent abroad is important. So if you're coming back to the US, that's going to work against that 1 year timeline. So you've got to be very strategic about the L1 and make sure it's going to work for you.
One of the cool ways I've seen it work is for MBA students with a consulting background where like Bain or McKinsey or something is, maybe they worked in the Singapore office for 5 years and now their MBA is getting paid for at Stanford and they're going to graduate. And since an MBA program is less than 2 years long, they've worked for the parent company abroad for 1 year out of the last 3 years. And so they can get an L1 to start instead of their OPT. So that can be kind of cool.
Yeah.
If somebody's a startup founder or in an early stage startup looking for options to create an L1 opportunity, it might be less ideal than an O1 or we're going to be talking with Danielle in a little bit about the cap exempt H-1B. Because it's a lot to uproot somebody who's already living in the United States to like go to Canada for a year and start a new life over in the snow. That can be a hard transition. We also see startups trying to get L1s with global PEO services. Some of the names that tend to come up are like Remote or Deal or one of these like payroll companies. We have not directly, I think this is still true, Lynda. I don't think we've done any L1s for people using those services. That would be something where that would be the employer abroad. So you would want to bring it up to them about whether they would consider doing this for you.
Yeah, those are not very clean and they'd be highly scrutinized. So that's not something that, is generally going to be approvable. So we would just evaluate each case on its own merits and make a determination. I mean, a new office L is nice for a company that's already been doing business for 1 year abroad. So if you're a CEO, your company's taking off abroad, you're hiring, and now you're like, okay, now I want to come to the US. That's perfect. I mean, we do those. The new office L, you don't have to have business operations in the US yet, just sort of an office space, a business plan.
Yeah, so the extent that you're like in another country and you were hoping to have a chance to bring somebody from your startup to the US for the first time on H-1B, definitely consider using the L. It can work before and after the Delaware flip. We've done that several times. There's no prevailing wage. And the really nice thing about L visas is your spouse can just work automatically. There's no work permit required. So that's a really beautiful thing. 7-year limit for L1, 5-year limit for L1A, and 5 for L1B.
Right.
Okay. Another option, J1 exchange visitors. Do you ever recommend, like, I rarely recommend J's, but they are a tool. They are useful. There's different programs, but the main
Yeah.
thing is all non-immigrant intent.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a fussy visa, I think about it. Like it's not easy. You've got to
Yeah.
check a lot of boxes. It's not necessarily great for startups. They prefer you have at least 5 US employees. They can do a site visit. There can be restrictions to go back to your home country for 2 years if you have a home residency requirement. But I do use it from time to time because there really are true interns. There are
Yeah.
new grads or people that are in a degree program. I mean, there's a need for that. And then sometimes those people decide to go for an H-1B, but you really don't want to go from a change of status from a J-1 to an H-1B because J-1's not dual intent. You're really supposed to just come and it's a cultural exchange. You gain knowledge, you bring it back to your home country.
Yeah. But if you are married, your spouse can apply for a work permit, but they have to wait for the work permit to come in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the professional spouse will get a J1 at some company, and then the startup founder spouse will do that on the work permit. And then the couple will have the most flexibility together. The researcher one is really good. It's 5 years, but you're supposed to have the intent to depart at the end of it. And you're not supposed to pursue a green card, and the company can get in trouble if you do things with the State Department, or the associations might no longer want to work with you, for example, if you let your employees do that. And the other really big thing about J1s is if you accept US or foreign government funding for your program, or if the State Department randomly decides when they issue your visa that there's a shortage of your occupation in your home country, you could be stuck with this 2-year 212E home residency requirement. If you got a Fulbright, it's very difficult, almost impossible to get that removed. And so we have to do a lot of fancy footwork for like Stanford J1 Fulbrights, traveling back home for sabbaticals every summer for 3 months, trying to chip away at these 2 years while getting an O1 abroad. So there's a lot of reasons to be cautious about a J1, primarily it's non-immigrant intent is absolutely required. Whereas like we've gotten O's for people with green cards almost approved. So it's a lot more flexible, even though it's technically not dual intent. Okay, what are the E2, E1, and what are the E visas?
Yeah, so these visas are really interesting. They do work for founders from time to time. We do definitely apply these visa categories. The key is that your country has to have a trade agreement with the US. So there's like a reciprocity thing, the two countries. And I know like India and China, for example, there's no treaty agreement, so it doesn't work. And then you also have to look at the nationality of the company, the ownership of the company, and the nationality of the individual seeking the E, and that has to align. So if the company is owned by a Mexican national and then your candidate is from Sweden, that's not going to work. So you really have to make sure all your ducks in a row in that regard.
It's a very narrow use case. Like this would probably work if your H-1B lottery was denied at the wholly owned subsidiary of a Japanese anime company with their LA, subsidiary or something. And it's like, oh no, we didn't get that, but we're a Japanese owned company and you're a Japanese citizen and you're essential. So here's your dependent investor visa. Kind of hard to set, but if people are in the startups abroad seeking US market access category, you could use an E2 to establish US operations, but an L would probably be better if you can prove you were on payroll for a year abroad, because the E2 is adjudicated at the consulates. If you do a change of status and USCIS approves it, the State Department doesn't care, so you have to restart the process. It could take many, many months. It's more arbitrary. But we've gotten weird E2s approved. But on the other, then you raise a bunch of money in the US and your cap table shows that your company is no longer 50% owned by citizens of your home country, and then your visa becomes invalid. So it could be a tool, but it's probably not the correct solve for most people on this webinar. India and China and Brazil and lots of other big countries don't qualify for these. So they're more
Yeah,
limited.
it's like a use caution kind of visa. You know, there's a lot of
Yeah, it's like only if everything else doesn't work.
right.
Yeah, yeah. But your spouse can work, so that's nice.
That's true.
International entrepreneur. Oh my God. It's kind of back. Kind of insane. We went to New Orleans. We complained that all the cases were still pending after almost 3 years. And then all the immigration lawyers in the country started getting their IERs approved for startup founders from 2021. So this is a new-ish thing still after 8 years since Obama created it. We would be willing to accept startup founder IER cases today. If I think my ideal test case at this point, if you really want to do this, would be that you've gotten, oh, and we have to update these numbers for inflation, but let's say you've gotten $115,000 of US government contracts from federal, state, regional, local government, like an SBIR grant or STTR technology transfer grant. Even if it's less than $115,000, we could still try to use it. Like my ideal model client for this to expedite it, let's say they would have gotten $120,000 from the Department of Defense to build a critical and emerging technology, and they can get a 3-letter agency to write a letter to expedite it. I think that we could get easily approved in like 6 weeks, and you could move here for 2.5 years. Your spouse can get a work permit. That would be the ideal. If you got money from Silicon Valley VCs at a fund, then we're going to need more details, and maybe we try to make some sort of economic hardship thing of why you should be here. It's a little more convoluted. We'll try to get it expedited for you, but well, if you want to do this now, hopefully this administration would get it approved in like 3 to 4 months. That's what we've been seeing also in the field. So maybe it's back. Let us know if you want to try. Okay, and then there's also these country-specific options. So tell us about these, Lynda.
Yeah, so these are all non-immigrant work visa options based on the individual's citizenship, not country of birth, which is nice. So for Canadian and Mexican citizens, we have the TN. The trick with the TN is it's very occupation specific, and there's specific guidance under what used to be NAFTA, which is now USMCA, which calls out the specific occupations and the typical requirements, like a bachelor's degree, or if there's experience that they'll accept. So you really have to fit into one of those boxes.
It really doesn't work very well for CEOs because they have a very strict definition of self-employment. Like we can get H-1Bs now for 100% owners of companies and CEOs, but I don't think we can pull that off for a TN.
No, not with a TN for sure. And if you have a CEO, you've got to fit him into like an occupation, like an engineer or accountant, and that's not really their role. So it's not, it doesn't work for everyone.
Like a CTO who's a software engineer who owns less than 50% of the company, like we could create a compelling argument for that person.
Oh yeah, we've done those for sure. And those are pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got different ways to process the TNs. Like you could do it at the border if you're Canadian. You could do it through USCIS. Mexicans go to their embassy. So there's a lot of strategy, I would say, involved in the TN.
It's very complicated though. We need like a specific degree and like a bachelor's degree in a specific list of fields and a correlated job that's like a professional job, and most startup jobs don't qualify.
Yeah, so it's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's a nice option. You can come into the US for 3 years. You can keep extending it. There isn't a time maximum, but there isn't immigrant intent. It's not a dual intent visa, so you've got to be mindful.
Yeah, and your spouse can't work.
No.
Yeah, other countries, Chile, Singapore, Australia, citizens there have these extra options. You don't have to be born in any of these countries. So if you're from India and you became an Australian citizen, you could qualify for an E3. If you're from China and your parents immigrated to Canada when you were a kid and you have a Canadian passport, you could qualify for a TN. These are sort of like H-1Bs, but non-immigrant intent. H-1B one is shorter duration.
Yeah.
Australian spouses can get work permits, which is nice. But yeah.
And they can be fast. Like that's what I like about the H-1B1 E3. You have the embassy application option. So you can avoid USCIS.
I think basically if you have a passport from one of these countries, make sure we or your human resources person knows it, because then we can explore them in more detail.
Definitely.
Okay, now we're going to invite up Danielle Goldman from Open Avenues Foundation. Hi, Danielle. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. My favorite partners.
Oh, thank you so much. Oopsies. We love working with you, and I'm just going to share a little bit to introduce you. Danielle Goldman is the founder and executive director of Open Avenues Foundation, which really focuses on demonstrating the value of foreign nationals in the United States. She got her start, one of her amazing immigration projects in the past was to help more than 250 migrant families who had been separated at the US-Mexico border, which led to her start in philanthropy and immigration and nonprofits. And you've been really growing Open Avenues over the last year. Congratulations. It's so exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been quite a journey, and we're really happy with the impact, not only on the foreign nationals who have been able to stay here, but as we'll talk about, also on students, demonstrating how foreign nationals add value to the United States when they stay here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's dive into your slides. Can you please, and we partnered with you guys for, I don't know, many companies, many visas, maybe even like pre-pandemic. I think I remember talking from my physical office back in the day. And a lot of this can be very helpful for people at the very end of their STEM OPT who might have to leave and the company doesn't have a subsidiary abroad and the person's been grinding behind the scenes brilliantly, but like not of O1 fame level. Maybe they're from India or another country that doesn't have one of these specific visas. So I think everybody's really curious about how does it work to have this H-1B plan B and potentially get an H-1B without the lottery.
Yeah, awesome. I'm happy to start with what a cap exempt H-1B is. And the reality is that in the US, there are 4 types of organizations that qualify as exempt from the H-1B lottery. So all of you are here because you weren't selected in the H-1B and you're trying to figure out the plan B. A cap exempt H-1B, if you work for one of the 4 types of cap exempt organizations full-time, awesome. You never even have to go into the lottery. The 4 types of organizations are universities, nonprofit research institutions, government research institutions, and nonprofits affiliated with a university. So awesome. If you work for one of these full-time, amazing. But most of you on the call probably do not. You probably work for a startup, maybe your own, you work for a company, and you're trying to figure out how is a cap exempt H-1B even applicable to me? And the reality is in the United States, if you work part-time for one of these cap exempt organizations, then any US employer can file a concurrent full-time cap exempt H-1B. In this scenario, you work for 2 employers. You work part-time for one of these 4 types of organizations and full-time for your company. So Sophie and Lynda have many companies and foreign nationals over the years that have nominated individuals to work in our program part-time. And so I would love to talk a little bit more about that program as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the eligibility. And just before we get to that, I just want to mention, you know, we've been able to do this for people in the US who are at the tail end of their OPT through a change of status. We even did one through consular processing for a guy in Japan who was married and had kids. And this was his first visa to the United States. And it got approved at the embassy and he was able to move here. And then we were able to activate his employment immediately at the startup once he arrived. So who is eligible? What type of nominations can companies propose to Open Avenues? How does it work?
Yeah. So we renamed on January 1st the fellowship. It's now called the Build Fellowship. And if you go to buildfellowship.com, you'll see a really exciting new fellowship program that we have reinvigorated because, as Sophie said, we actually started this in 2018 out of Open Avenues Foundation. What Open Avenues Foundation launched in 2017 and 2018 and built in 2019 is a program where we are a nonprofit affiliated with universities. We qualify as one of the 4 types of CAP exempt organizations, and we are able to sponsor part-time fellowship positions for individuals to spend 5 to 8 hours per week training US students at our partner colleges and universities. So if you're a software developer, you can join the fellowship as a software development fellow, training students in the field of software development. If you work as a graphic designer, you could join as a graphic design fellow, leading students in graphic design projects. And we scope projects depending on everyone's specialty field. So we have a wide range of individuals who are, now we're working with lawyers, and we're working with individuals in AI, and we're working with individuals in data science. We've really expanded the specialty fields in which we work. But you have to qualify for an H-1B. So you must have at least a bachelor's degree or the equivalency of a bachelor's degree, which could be, 8 to 10 years of work experience that can qualify as a bachelor's degree. We're looking for individuals who have some work experience so that you can spend the time training students and impart that knowledge in the US in the way that Congress intended for these CAP exempt visas to be used. And we would love to see experience mentoring. It's not mandatory. And the idea is that you come to us and you have a US employer that would like to sponsor you full time. And so these are part-time positions where you can actually go to the Build Fellowship. It's www.buildfellowship.com. I'll drop it in here, and you can go and nominate yourself, or you can have your company nominate you, and you will be put through a process. You give us some information, you'll meet with one of our partnerships, someone from our partnerships team, and have a consultation about what this means for you. But these part-time positions are a great option.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we've seen this really work for people whose employment is both urgent and important. The company can't afford to lose you. And I love that you've now opened it up for people to self-nominate for working at their company. So that's amazing. That can
we have a lot of founders in the program as well who just aren't yet qualified for an O1. You and Lynda might do an analysis and say, you have a 60% chance likelihood of getting this O1, and then it's a risk analysis and you figure it out.
Yeah, and if somebody raised, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and the cash is sitting there and they're still in building their MVP, it's like, what's the best use of your time and resources? Is it trying to go through the motions of becoming famous when your product is still in stealth mode to get an O1? Or is it just securing your immigration status for 6 to 12 months to be able to stay here and actually build? So amazing. Okay, and we're gonna save time for questions. So we're gonna briefly talk about green cards, and then there's like 22 questions. So we're gonna go through those as well. So here's the other option, and I'm gonna cover this pretty briefly. You don't have to get a visa. So in certain situations, if somebody's here, like let's say you're gonna get your bachelor's degree in May and you were not selected for the H-1B this year, but you're going to get regular OPT and you're going to get STEM OPT, and you don't really need to travel internationally. So you're going to be in the United States for like 3.5 more years. You might be able to just self-petition your green card and have a green card by the end of that in the EB-1A category for anybody in the world, in the EB-2 category with a national interest waiver for people not born in India or China. There's a bit of a backlog, but it's still pretty fast for people from other places in the world. And the really good thing about this is you can self-petition, so your company doesn't have to sponsor you, and it will start your wait it will get you a priority date, which is your turn in line for a green card. And eventually that number is going to be picked. So even if you're from India and you just got a master's degree and maybe one day you want to be a startup founder and you're going to work in a company, if you don't want to wait around for your company to be able to get through the perm process or the I-140 for you, and you know you're going to keep trying the H-1B lottery every year, and you have an eventual business plan for a startup, or maybe you have a PhD in a critical and emerging technology, these are all ways to self-petition your green card now to at least lock in your priority date, and later you can always get an EB-1A and transfer your priority date from your EB-2 to your EB-1 to speed up your wait time for a green card. So green cards, let's see, different considerations. You want to think about how long you have to wait in the US on your current status. You want to think about whether that's a dual intent or non-immigrant intent status and whether you have international travel plans. The really cool thing, though, that we got through in December was that USCIS announced that an approved I-140 is no longer a reason for a denial of regular OPT or STEM OPT. And the F1 guidance on non-immigrant intent at the consulates is very light right now. So basically, international students can start green cards even while they're in school. And then you want to think about your overall wait time based on your country. And EB-1A is for extraordinary ability, very much like the O1, and EB-2 NIW requires a master's degree or exceptional ability, which is way easier than extraordinary ability, and some sort of plan, a proposed endeavor for how your work is going to help the United States or the world in the future. All in all, when you're looking at this, you're going to want to think about your time, gathering the evidence, you know, how do you mitigate any risk in the process, knowing that this is a human process with one adjudicator who's not well versed in your field, who might be having a good day or a bad day, who's going to make the decision. You're going to need to set aside money for the government filing fees, maybe translations, premium processing. You might need an education evaluation, then of course legal fees. So, you know, those are things we can talk about more in the questions if there are any. We do have a promo code for our class, our online 15-module video class I recorded called Alcorn Academy. So that's going to be for 20% off. So you guys are going to get that in the chat window. And now we're going to go to the Q&A. And I'm just going to leave up our contact information for everybody so that you can schedule a consultation with us, complete our questionnaire. We are happy to chat with you. Okay, so 26 questions, 11 minutes. What is the likelihood of a second lottery this year? Low?
Yeah, I mean, it has happened 3 out of the 4 years since we've done their registration, or the last 3 or 4 years, but they're trying to hone their statistics, so it's probably pretty low.
Is there a visa by investment? Yes. E2 visa for citizens of treaty countries and EB5 green card. We don't do EB5s. We think that you could spend the same amount of money investing in yourself and your personal brand and your startup, and it's probably going to be a much better use of your money and a faster green card process. But yes, that does exist. Is there a process for perm and how to get it? The company has to sponsor. So if you don't know what this is and you're not at a company, or you're not like working at a company managing their HR department, then talk to your company HR person about their perm policy and when they will support you. And if they don't have a lawyer, we're happy to help your company do perm for you. But it's like probably like a 2-year process, right?
Yeah, that's a good estimate.
Yeah, okay. Can I do perm if I did not get selected in the H-1B lottery? I think so. If your company is willing to sponsor you, a lot of companies have policies that they don't do perm unless you're on an H status. So, and then a lot of companies can't do perms right now if they had layoffs in the last 6 months. But theoretically, if you're on regular OPT, you didn't get selected in the H, your company's willing and able to do a perm for you. With that new F1 guidance, you should still be able to get STEM OPT renewed, even if you are in the perm process. So technically, it's possible. What's a priority date?
Well, it's the date that you are basically in line. So if you do an I-140 track green card, like an EB-2NIW, EB-1A, it's the day your I-140 is filed. If it's a perm track green card, it's the day that your perm was filed. And you use that to track the immigrant visa availability on the Department of State's visa bulletin that comes out every month. So it's your place in line.
Can my employer file an I-140 with my current status or during day one CPT? Well, we don't know what your current status is, but during day one CPT, maybe if you're never planning to leave the United States and you don't need a new F1 student visa, yeah, probably.
And then you do a cap exempt H-1B if you're at the end of your time. So yeah,
there you go.
There you go.
There you go. Okay. What is the timeline of the second H-1B lottery? Well, if it happens, maybe July, right?
Yeah, July or August. So they receive all the H-1Bs by June 30th. So anytime after that.
Yeah, but unlikely, probably. Because we had 30% of our clients selected, and we have a lot of people with US master's degrees. And they did one person, one chance this year. And so they probably had, I'm guessing, 400,000 registrants. And so I'm sure there's probably going to be a low attrition rate this year, but we'll see. What is the ease in changing employers on an O1 visa? I'll answer this one. You can transfer an O1 from one employer to another. You can also get an O1 with an agent, which will be the topic of our webinar on April 26th, and you'll be getting the registration link in the follow-up email to this webinar. And with an agent who is your O1 petitioner, we can craft an itinerary of services that allows you to work at multiple gigs in your field and to add and remove projects without amending your O1. So that would theoretically allow you to have 3 years uninterrupted, no immigration changes needed. If I have an agent, but I am unable to work as a model, do I need current projects to apply? There's a lot I don't know about in this question, but I'm going to assume that this person is a fashion model who wants to work on an O1 visa, who doesn't have any work lined up. So basically on an O1, you need an itinerary of services explaining what it is that you're going to do in the US over the next 3 years. It can be paid work. It can be unpaid work. It can be employment, receiving a salary or an hourly wage. You can be an independent contractor. You can be a sole proprietor. You can start your own company. You can write a book. You can have a nonprofit. There's lots of things you could do. What is the difference between getting a green card through the EB-2 NIW and the one that is sponsored by your employer in terms of the timeline? It's like 2 years faster because you skip perm. Does it make sense to go the NIW route, even if your employer will file your green card at some point? Yes, because if you have your own EB-2 NIW and then the priority dates randomly change, if you are at a new company that hasn't done your perm yet because they've had layoffs, then you might miss your opportunity to file an I-485. But if you have your own EB-2 NIW, then you could either file through your company if you want, or through yourself if you want, and not depend on an employer. How long is the O1 visa valid for? Up to 3 years at a time with 1-year extensions, or you can just get another 3-year O1. I see a lot of people focused on press coverage for an O1. Is this a prevalent path for approval? Are we seeing applications without press coverage being approved? What's your advice? We see all types of applications being approved. Press is not required. We've certainly gotten many O1s for people who did not have any press. There's this like cottage industry of EB1, O1 publicists. If you do like a Google search for O1 or extraordinary ability or EB1 PR, you'll find them. You know, I don't know. If you want to do it, great. If you don't want to, it's fine. It's not necessary. Unlike the H-1B, I believe the L1 would only allow you to work for the company you were originally affiliated with. That is correct. What are the options for employees on an L1 visa when they are looking to switch jobs once they have been back in the US for a while on the L1? Well, we talked about this, but probably an O1 might be best, or self-petitioning a green card, or use the build fellowship and get a cap exempt H-1B to work at another company. And how long is the L1 valid for once back in the US? Up to 7 years for an L1A, up to 5 years for an L1B. For an L1, can you start the process before your OPT ends? Yes. Can you be on paid leave while you're parked abroad and waiting for the L1 to process, or do you have to be actively working, Lynda?
So you don't have to be, the L1 is nice because it's intermittent. You could go back and forth. So we do Ls where people spend half their time working abroad and then they come back to the US. I guess I'm not really clear on all the facts here.
I mean, you don't have to be employed at all when you're a student. Like if they put you on some garden leave and keep paying you and you're not working, that's amazing. And I don't even know if you could do that on an F1. We'd have to figure it out. But a lot of this contemplates that you've like quit the prior company, you're not working for them at all, and then you get a new L1 for the US company in the future. Can you come on an L1 if you were a consultant working solely for one company? No, unfortunately, you have to be an employee on payroll, getting paychecks, regularly employed. It's not going to work as a consultant, unfortunately, unless you're an owner of the business already abroad. Can an employer apply for a green card F1 OPT, F1 to perm I-140? Is that possible? What are the repercussions? I don't understand this question. I guess if you're on OPT, yes, the employer can start the green card process for you. It's safer if you don't have to travel internationally. If you do, look at the Build Fellowship to get a dual intent H-1B visa in your passport if you have to go abroad. If I get an O1A agent, can I full-time, I don't know what this says. Can I work full-time and own my startup? Yeah, but then you're going to have employment law and intellectual property considerations. My podcast with IP attorney Sanjay Prasad talks about how to navigate creating a startup if you have a full-time job and how to protect your intellectual property. And his bottom line advice was, if you're working at a big tech company, quit and then create your IP and then create your startup. But yeah, like if you want to have, if you work as a programmer, but your startup is like a coffee company, you know, it's probably fine. If I get an O1 agent, oh, we already did that one. Can I self-petition in the EB2 category? Yes, that's the NIW. Somebody works for Wall Street Bank doing risk and has a master's degree, but she doesn't know if she qualifies for the NIW. How does somebody know? You talk to us, you ask us for a consultation, we'll give you our questionnaire, you give us your LinkedIn, you fill out our check boxes. But I think we could certainly do we could craft an NIW for somebody like this. Minimum amount on E2 visa depends on the business. Typically people invest $100,000 to $300,000 to be safe, I would say, and the money's spent before we do the E2. I'm going to start my PhD in a few weeks. Will it help my O1 application? I'm also working towards the category of judging events and membership. A PhD will not by itself help, but you will get opportunities for authorship in peer-reviewed journals, and you will have the opportunity to be a peer reviewer, which will count as judging. Is day one CPT a valid option? My STEM OPT ends this July. I need more time for my O1. My main employer gave day one CPT as an option. Looks like I need more time for an O1. I just recently launched my startup. I would talk to Danielle and Open Avenues and the Build Fellowship. I think that'd be valuable. Can I get an F1 OPT for PhD after day one CPT? Depends on your program, ask them, but I think a lot of people on day one CPT don't end up with OPT, but I think that's typically because they already like maxed it out before. So you can pay for a consultation with us if you need us to figure that out, if your school can't help you. Do video podcasts count as press? Maybe, depends on how many people like it. Oh my God, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to try to answer these. Can I hold an O1 with an employer and an O1 agent visa consecutively? Yes, people transition from one to the other. Hey, Danielle, interested in the Build Fellowship. What are some previous reasons big tech companies have declined being on board to file? Danielle is typing the answer. You can look for that. You can also reach out to her. They're very wonderful there. Is there a point of applying for a green card while on OPT if you are an Indian national because it can't be extended like the H-1B, correct? It shortens your overall wait time to get a green card, potentially by decades, the sooner you file. And Danielle, are you able to transfer to a different company while in the program with Open Avenues or on a capped exempt H-1B? I will let her answer. Okay, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. We appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. We'll share everything shortly. Bye.
Take care.